Hello everyone, you're welcome once again to another learning session. Today in our math class, we'll be looking at ratio. What is ratio? Ratio is a mathematical concept and is a way to compare two or more quantities. Two or more values, stuff like that. It could be, for instance, you are trying to compare the number of boys to girls you have in a place or in a class. It could be you are trying to compare the number of maybe a certain color of something to another color of the same thing. Okay, it's just a way of comparing two or more quantities. Okay, it's often written as a fraction, like 3 out of 5. But then it can also be written, and I think more usually it's written using a colon. This is a colon here, dot. Okay, this is called a colon. It's written this way, I think, more often than it being written as a fraction. But then they mean the same thing. 3 out of 5 or 3/5 is the same as 3 to 5 or 3 colon 5, and it can also be written as 3 to 5. Whenever it's written as 3 to 5, most times ratio is added at the front. It's written ratio 3 to 5. Okay, so when you see this and see this and you see that, they mean the same thing. They're referring to, they mean ratio, and they are a kind of comparing two things. But then ratio can also be used to compare more than two things. So you can have ratio of 2 to 5 to 7. You can have something like this when the quantities you are comparing is about 3 different stuff. Okay, so that's the way it can differ from being used as a fraction, because in terms of fraction you can only compare 2 quantities, but when it's like up to 3 quantities, it can't feature like a fraction anymore. There's no way you can represent it making it look like fraction. But then it can be used, the colon can be used, and then even this can be used as 2 to 5 to 7. So these other 2 can be used, but the fraction representation will not work when the quantities are more than 2. So we're going to look at some ratios and how they feature, and even some terms that apply when we are using ratio. There are some words that are peculiar to ratio. We're also going to look at them. I'm very sure by the time we finish this lesson, you're going to come off with some great understanding of this concept. So looking at our example here, the ratio 3 to 5, the first number that appears in your ratio is called antecedent, and the number that follows after the colon is the consequent. Antecedent and consequent. What ordinarily antecedent means what comes before, and this number here in the ratio comes first before the other one, and then consequent means what follows as a result. So just these 2 terms, I want you to see the names they are called. The first one is antecedent, and then the one that follows is the consequent. Next, we'll be looking at how we can use ratio in maybe our everyday lives, or some scenarios we come up with or we are faced with, how we can use ratios to resolve them. Now let's try to see how ratio features. If you have something like this, a ratio of boys to girls in a class is 5 to 2. That means that for every 5 boys you have in this class, there are 2 girls. For every 5 boys, you have 2 girls. That means if there are 10 boys in this class, you will have 4 girls. If there are 15 girls in this class, you will have 6 girls. If there are 20 boys in this class, you are going to have 8 girls. So that's how ratio works. For every of these antecedents, you have this consequence. For every of this first number of whatever it represents, you have the second number of what that represents. we're going to do a little calculation, something that is not too sophisticated for our level, something that is not too complex, so that we understand better. Okay, so let's extend the example we have here on the board to see how it works. The ratio of boys to girls in a class is 5:2, ratio 5:2. If there are 21 students in this class, how many boys are there? So how are you going to know the exact number? This is not giving us the exact number of the boys or the girls. It's just telling us that to every 5 boys in this class, you have 2 girls. So if all the students in this particular class are 21, how do you know the number of boys and how do you know the number of girls? So whenever you have a problem like this in ratio, what you do is add these 2 numbers together. That is the antecedent and the consequence. Okay, so you add them. This ratios here is referring to the antecedent and the consequent. Okay, so you add them together. That is the first step. That's the very first step. So you have 5 plus 2. That's the antecedent and the consequent. So the next step, after adding the antecedent and consequent to get whatever it is you get, in this case is 7, the next step is you divide the number of students you have by the sum of the ratio. That is, here in this case we have 21 as the number of students we have, okay, and the sum that we got of the antecedent and consequent is 7. So what do we do next? We divide this 21, which is number of students, by 7, the sum of the antecedent and consequent. And when you divide 21 by 7, your answer will be 3. That's the next step. Now step 3, you multiply the antecedent for boys and the consequent by the quotient obtained to get for the 2 values or whatever it is you're looking for. If it is the 2 you want to get, you multiply the antecedent and the consequent by the quotient that you obtained, which in this case is 3, because when we divided 21 by 7, we got 3. So you now use the 3 to multiply the antecedent. You get the number of the first part you're looking for, and you use that 3 also to multiply the second the consequent rather, so to get the other one. So since in this case we are asked to look for the number of boys, remember boys, the ratio of boys is 5, and that's the first one, the antecedent. So since that's what we are looking for, now that we have our quotient 3, you simply use that 3 to multiply 5. And when you use 3 to multiply 5, what you get is 15. That means in this class there are 15 boys. If you want to check if your answer is correct, also maybe calculate for the number of girls using this formula. Now you know it's 3 you're going to use to multiply antecedent and consequent. So also use the 3 to multiply the 2. If you use 3 to multiply 2, it will give you the number of girls. Okay, even though in the question we are not actually looking for the number of girls, just to be sure of what we are doing, okay, you can just do 6 times 3. 2 times 3. And that gives us what? 6 girls. So what do you ask yourself to find out if you are correct or not? They told you that the total number of students is 21. And here you have found out that we have 15 boys and 6 girls. So add 15 and 6 together. Does it give you 21? Yes, it gives us 21. That means we are correct. So in this class where the ratio of boys to girls is 5:2, that means there are 15 boys. And since there are 15 boys, it means automatically there are 5 girls. I hope we've learned something in this lesson. In our next class, we're going to learn something on equivalent ratios. Okay, we will take more examples of this, and then we will look also at equivalent ratios. So for now, we're calling it a day. We hope to see you next week. Until then, stay blessed and stay safe.